Fun.
There
It
you
will be
go.
fun.
Interesting. It's really interesting, but for us to have an opportunity to talk about the challenge and opportunities that fintechs have in financial services. So the subject that we're going to talk about is the challenge and opportunities that fintechs have to partner with banks. And interestingly enough, banks also are looking at this space very, very carefully.
Mhm,
With
mhm.
it comes both opportunities and comes risk. So, but from your perspective, what do you think is involved as far as fintechs working with banks in a win-win situation that provides value to both parties?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a great question, Win. That's exactly where a lot of fintechs and banks are struggling. In spite of the fact that they've got a very good fitment of the product, the bank has got a direct need for that particular functionality, but still it doesn't get into production. Because today, getting something into the production system of a bank is way more than just having good functionality in the software. The bank's governance, risk management, and regulatory compliance expectations are so huge.
Mhm.
And if the fintech doesn't understand that, or if they are not been mentored to achieve that state of maturity before bank actually tries to use it, then both of them are heading for it's a non-starter, honestly. Without understanding all these things, there is no way a fintech product can get into production in a bank, and both parties have to work on that.
So that's a very interesting point. So one of the things that I've seen, having worked with hundreds of fintechs over the
Mhm,
last
mhm.
13 years, many times the fintech has their product, they have their solution and capability, but where they fall short is how they can be commercialized within the financial services. It's not just enough to have a product. How do they integrate within the bank and the infrastructure of the bank? And usually that could be a daunting task. So what
It
have
is.
you
It is.
seen, and what do you think that the fintechs could do in order to be better equipped to have those conversations with the bank regulatory division, because they have an objective, the fintechs have an objective, and sometimes they're not on the same page.
They're not. Often they are not. I mean, the way this works is today, I do lots of RFPs. I'm on the both sides of the table. Sometimes I write RFPs, sometimes I respond to RFPs for my clients. And it is fair to say that maybe 60-70% of RFP questionnaires
Mhm.
are today about governance, risk, and compliance, and not about the functionality of your product. And if this is something that the fintech doesn't understand, then no matter how great the product, they are going to have a hard time getting into a bank. And it is not about just the technology compliance, it is about business compliance, which is becoming so critical. When you have been in this line for a long time, and you know that today, when you have got a new party that you want to onboard into a banking system, you are not going anywhere till that party passes your AML, KYC, OFAC, and all those kinds of things. And if the fintech has not understood this, they have not built those capabilities, or at least have not provided hooks for somebody else to do it on their behalf, it's not happening.
That's right. So how do you visualize a win-win situation on the bank side as well as the fintech? How can we help the fintech to understand what they need to do from a very tactical approach in order to be successful? There's
Mhm.
many product and solutions that fintechs have that they're not able to move forward. How
Right.
can we help them move forward within the bank
Mhm,
and
mhm.
really get their product commercialized within the bank and become a real good partner?
Absolutely. I mean, what they're developing is something that the banks desperately want. So it's not that they've got a hard time selling the product capability to the bank. It is the product usability that we are talking about. And that is what they need to understand very clearly. Let us say one of the hottest places today, when that you are also deeply involved in, is the payment space.
Mhm.
In the payment space, there are lots and lots of startups doing extremely innovative stuff, leveraging chats and leveraging voice systems and all kinds of things. Great stuff is happening. But what is that chat operating on? Whose cloud is it that it is stored on?
Mhm.
Is it encrypted? Who can see it? How does it travel? What data is asked for on the chat bot? Is it personally identified information? If you don't have absolutely ready and crisp answers to these questions, then that product, the bank business may want it all they want, but a large bank today, if you see, they've got a dozen departments. Win. security, legal, compliance, card security, all kinds of people. And unless they bless it, it's not moving forward. That's a very, very clear message I want to give to all fintechs.
I think that's a good point. So if I was a fintech and I was looking at a partnership with a bank,
Hmm.
and I feel that I have a very slick solution
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
banks need, kind of describe for us what you would think as the steps
Yeah.
that would be needed by the fintech in
Hmm.
order to get on the bank's radar and
Absolutely.
as a vendor and a partner.
As a partner, absolutely. So first of all, a lot of banks have got incubation programs these days. Try to get into that, try to take advantage of the education that they're offering you. Forget about whether they eventually take your product or not. Just learn from them what is the expectation of a big bank. That's a very big resource available to you. You go to any big, Citibank, Barclays, Deutsche, anyone you go to, they've got lots of incubation programs.
Yep.
And the other thing is understand your offering in the context of the bank's total product space. Don't, I mean, the problem fintechs have many times that they're very, very isolated in their thinking. They think only about their product. Don't do that. The bank is a huge collection of, literally thousands of products and services. Where do you fit in? So the bank has got a front end. Front office has got hundreds of applications, the traditional CASA and letter of credit and this and that. That still keeps going. Then you've got a huge middle office, you've got a back office. Understand the workflows in the bank that you are going to be a part of. And then based on that, understand what is going to be the compliance expectation of the bank from your product. And let me tell you this, it is not necessarily something very large all the time. You have to just know what it is and bake that into your product architecture. If you try to do it as an add-on later on, it's not going to happen easily.
No, I think that's a real good point. So my experience has been in working with banks and fintechs that it would love to think that there would be a cookie cutter process that could be followed, but that's not the way that it is. And many
No.
situations are very unique. One of the things that I find that fintechs really struggle with is the point of entry within a bank. Is it on the product side? Is it on the technology side? Is it on the innovation side? All these are or could be points of entry, but at the end of the day, somebody has to write the check. And so to understand who is the buyer of those services is something within the bank that needs to be clearly defined. And even on the fintech, to understand who's going to write the check. Because you can come into a bank, a fintech could enter into a bank. Those conversations could be very well. But if that fintech is not going to be commercialized within the business unit that could write that check, they're going to go nowhere. And
Exactly.
usually some of the problems that I have found is that is the challenge. But what we have been able to do is really help to streamline that process to really understand the bank strategy,
Mhm.
and then what those needs are and how those needs can be translated. So you're absolutely right. I've been able to, and we've been able to look at who's the RFP going to be issued by, what group is it, and so you can come in through a point of entry of one group, but if that group is not responsible for those opportunities with a budget, it's not going to go anywhere.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then the overlay process, but something that you're very near and dear is once they're in, then they have to go through a very grueling process with
Absolutely.
procurement.
Yeah.
And if they're not ready and they don't have their ducks in a row, then they're not going to be successful.
It's
And
not.
yet they go through the pain and the expense,
Expense.
and they're not going to
Absolutely.
go anywhere
Absolutely.
to with the value. So there's an opportunity to educate fintech,
Yes.
and there's an opportunity to educate banks. So some of the even large banks that are still challenged with how do they deal with fintechs in a way that adds value and resonates. And this is a
Mhm.
gap that I continue to see across the financial services
Yep.
ecosystem. And it would be nice to say that some banks are getting it right and more are, but this is still an education process which needs to evolve to really see the value
Yeah,
along those
and
lines.
people are getting it surely, but they're spending way more time and money than they need to be on understanding this, especially on the fintech side, because they are not mentally prepared for this at all. In fact, and it is hard, yes, no question about it, but it's not as hard as it becomes. The more you delay thinking about these things, the harder it gets. Whereas to begin with, if you understand, ask a bank, go to your potential customers, go to your connections in the industry, people like us, a lot of people are there to help, just a kind of casual help explaining to people how things happen. And based on that, figure out, let us take some examples, let us say I'm developing something as a fintech that fits into the back office of a bank and which is going to deal more with, let us say, Swift for facilitating international wires, or it is going to deal with FedWire, or it is going to deal with FedNow, some program, or let us say NACHA for check processing. Then your compliance obligations are of a very different nature. It's all about, data security and encryption and how do you do API calls and how secure are those calls, those kind of things. On the other hand, let us say that you are doing something that fits into the front office of the bank. It collects data from customers, it moves across data from this form to that form, this application to that application. Then you are getting focused on the privacy side of the bank's obligations, and which is a very, very different thing to do.
Mhm.
So understand where your product is going to sit, and there are huge resources. I mean, I keep on telling people all the time, whether it is a fintech or a big company or a bank, that United States government NIST program provides the kind of resources and help that you cannot get by spending millions of dollars on consultants. But focus on that, understand how NIST can be leveraged into your, and NIST, mind you, Win, goes right all the way up to Department of Defense security preparedness. So there are multiple levels within NIST. You can understand what applies to you, pick it up properly, do a good roadmap. And what banks like to see is a roadmap, not just, I got this firewall and that firewall, but how am I going to continuously improve my security posture over next 2 years? That's what they want to see.
Buck, what would be the website? So if somebody wanted to get information on the NIST, where would they go?
Actually, it's a very simple thing, nist.gov. It's a US government website. NIST stands for National Institute of Standards and Technology. So nist.gov, go for US government.
It's really interesting because some of the same questions that are included in the NIST document are some of those same questions that are included in RFPs, obviously
Exactly.
taken in with procurement. So a fintech having this information up front will certainly help them craft their message and their
Exactly.
materials so that they could show their potential partners that they
Yep.
understand what the banks are looking for and how they can be well aligned as opposed
Absolutely.
to not necessarily be on the same page. So I think that's an effective
Now
way having that type of
you
information.
got that exactly right, Win. In fact, let me just give one example. So just to make it clear to all our listeners, on one hand, you have got this four-character acronym NIST, and on the other side, you have got FISMA, you have got FFIC, you have got PCI, you have got FedRAMP, you have got NYDFS, and the list is absolutely endless. And if you keep running after one regulation at a time, then that's all you're going to do for the rest of your life, and you're still not going to make it.
Well, it could be challenging. One of the things that we enjoy doing at BFSI Tech Talks is to share information based on our experience to the
Mhm,
industry.
mhm, mhm.
And these types of conversations with regards to the challenges and opportunities with fintechs and financial institutions is just one leg and one way that we want to continue and are committed to adding value. I think an appropriate future discussion is to kind of talk and bring this out more granular as we continue to get interest from our network of, of topics and issues that
Mhm,
they're
mhm.
dealing with. We've heard the fact that these are issues and topics, and we wanted to kind of provide a very brief overview today,
Mhm,
but we look
mhm.
forward to sharing more information to help our listeners and to help our members have value propositions that ultimately will lead to more revenue for them going into the new year.
Absolutely. No,
So,
we
so
should. We should.
yeah.
And we
So
touched a lot of topics today, Wayne. But each one of them we can actually go into a lot of detail. Like for example, if you have got a fintech that is specifically targeting US government as a customer, okay, then there is a completely different way to prepare for it. If you are creating a fintech product that is specifically going into payments, using credit cards, debit cards, stuff like that, then you have got a very different regulatory path. So Understanding exactly what you do, where do you fit into the ecosystem, and preparing accordingly is what the fintech is going to be able to move very quickly with the customers. In fact, you have gone through this way many, many times. I know you work with very large banks, and where, even after the business says that, hey, this product looks good to me, it has taken years for the agreement to get signed, right?
Yes, very true. Very, very true. And the challenge would be how would the short circuit the process. But the interesting aspect of it's the time, but it's also the money. Because in
Exactly.
many organizations, when they're engaging, especially with the large banks, the large bank procurement legal team is going to offset to the fintechs team. And
Yep.
the more information that you have up front, that will short circuit the conversation, the need, the billable hours. All this plays a role. And so what we want to do and what we have been successful with is to help these fintechs become educated. And then
Mhm.
even if they feel that they are, this is an evolving game. It changes. And how can we empower our fintech community to be aware of what's going to be asked of them, which is many of this is in the public domain space, and that will help them as they deal with the procurement
Absolutely.
and legal organization at the banks, because they're relentless. I mean, I've had one situation of working with a fintech. The whole process on the legal onboarding took a year, almost a year, over a year.
Mhm, mhm.
That's a
It
long time.
happens. And
So
both of
anyway,
both the parties lose big time when even the bank has probably the ability to survive for 1 year while all these negotiations are happening, but they are definitely losing business opportunities, especially they don't know the new startups which are joining some other bank and doing some things very quickly.
yes.
So bank also needs to move fast, and fintech in fact might collapse. Actually, I have seen fintechs that actually collapse because they just do not have the muscle to survive for 1 year, 1.5 year, while
Yeah,
the bank is negotiating, all these things.
yeah, that's true.
It's very hard.
This was a good conversation today. So I really do appreciate the fact that we're able to make the time in order to do this, and I really hope that our BFSI Tech Talk community really values and
Mhm.
appreciates this information.
Yep, absolutely. No, I'm
Thank
absolutely happy. I'm passionate about this. So thanks for organizing this talk, Wayne. And anything more, I'm more than happy to jump in.
thank you very much, Buck.
All right.